So, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do a sound bite. It's the 2nd of March, and here in Loughrea we have, we're at the tail end, hopefully, of a snowstorm. It seems to be thawing, but it's still snowing. And it's Friday afternoon, and I have decided to make a sound bite around a topic which came up in one of my Facebook groups. Somebody posted, and this is not a literal quote, but it basically represents what he was trying to say, that no matter how many times he read the rule book and no matter how many times he watched YouTube playthrough videos and went to Board Game Geek, he didn't get how to play the game, and maybe board gaming wasn't for him. Now, the problem with this post was that he never specified which game he was talking about, and somebody replied to his post on Facebook saying, I guess this is Mage Knight, isn't it? I have the same problem. And since the original poster never got back, we don't really know if it was Mage Knight. And at that time, I didn't have Mage Knight in my possession. I had never played it. I had watched a couple of playthroughs, and the game hadn't really appealed to me. And before you all have an aneurysm now, how someone can not like Mage Knight, because I know it's a game that really polarizes people. I've since remedied the situation. I have bought Mage Knight and 2 of its expansions. I've now played the first reconnaissance scenario, I believe, 5 times, each time, the last 3 times with different Mage Knights. So first I went with Arithea 3 times, and then I played with Tovak, and today I played with Norowas, and I'm having a blast. You know, I'm trying to go through all of the different Mage Knights to see how they play differently. I use the dummy player variant, so it's a full solo playthrough. And although one could say it's quite repetitive because you're always getting the same tiles, I can assure you it's not. But this whole question around how, no matter how many times I read the rules, I will never know how to play this game or never learn how to play this game, prompted me to write a reply as well. And I said that there is a difference. And since this was Facebook, you know, I didn't really go into much detail because you don't have that much space and I don't have that much time to post and, you know, to type stuff. But I think that there is a difference, generally speaking, between how to play a game and why and when to play. And I think I would like to use chess as an example. When I talk about how to play a game, I talk about understanding the rules. So how do you need to move your chess pieces, for example? What is a legal move? What's an illegal move? How do you take your opponent's pieces? How do you do things like castling or en passant taking, which is a move that you, for those of you who don't know chess, the pawns always take diagonally. Unless they take an opposing pawn at a certain in a certain position, they will actually take it, although it's diagonally from them, so that they can actually, sorry, they always take diagonally. But unless they play en passant, in which case they don't. So the rules of chess, I believe you can learn in about 2 to 3 days. Probably less if you spend a whole day committing yourself, have a rule book at hand, have a chess game at hand that you can actually move the chess pieces around, or you can use online software for that. But I think to understand how the different pieces move, so for example, queen can move in all directions until she either hits the board edge, hits an opposing piece, which she can either take unless she puts the king in danger, or herself, but even then she could take it, or until she hits a piece of her own color, and then of course she has to stop movement. So she moves in all directions, and she can go as far as the board edge, so she can go 8 squares maximum in either direction, horizontally, vertically, orthogonally, and diagonally. Bishops, the same, only diagonally and only ever on the color square that they started on. So if you're a black bishop, you're gonna stay a black bishop. If you're a white bishop, you're gonna stay a white bishop. Rooks, horizontally, vertically, orthogonally, are not bound by the square type, the square color they're on. And again, you can move as far as a friendly piece. And if you hit an opposing piece, you have to make a decision if you want to take it or not. King can move in any direction, but only one square unless he's castling. Castling is a different move, but can be taught really, really quickly. And I know this because I taught chess to kids and they pick this up really, really quickly, depending on how you teach it or what materials you use. But I would say that the basic rules of how chess pieces move around, even the knight, which is a bit tricky because it does this jump move, you can learn this in 1 to 2 days. So you'll be able to move the pieces and make legal moves. So you know how to play. But I think that there's a difference between how to play and why and when to play. And why and when to play are the questions that deal with strategy and tactic. So why do I make certain moves? Why are there certain opening gambits in chess which will give you an advantage? And why are certain moves, although they are legally possible, and according to people who know a lot more about chess than I do, a chess game can result in possible numbers of moves that are, and this is what I heard, and I don't know how they actually counted this or how they extrapolated this or how they made this calculation. There are as many legal moves in chess once the first move has been made as there are atoms in the universe. Since the universe is consistently expanding, I'm not quite sure if this is actually true, but that's what I heard. But the number of moves is really, really, really high. And I'm talking about only legal moves. I'm not talking about smart moves or winning moves. I'm just saying these are all the legal moves that you can take. And of course, they are positional moves because it depends on the position of your pieces on the board. But in theory, it's almost, well, maybe not infinite, but a very, very high number. So when and why to play, in order to play good chess, is going to take you hours, thousands and thousands of hours of practicing, of reading up on games that have been published, trying positions out, thinking through positions, mapping them out, playing against players of the same strength level as yours. And you will improve. If you have a knack for chess, you will improve. I'm not very good at playing chess. I'm very good at solving chess puzzles. But I have to say that actually sitting there in front of the board and then kind of like going, okay, so what is now the next best move? And if I have this position, what should I do next? That actually isn't for me for some reason. I'm very good at analyzing a position and then deciding on the next move that I would take, or solving chess puzzles. But actually, so I'm more the person for the end game, late, middle to end game. Getting to the middle game is always a chore for me. But no one would ever say, oh yeah, I'm just going to accept the fact that, or I'm just going to assume the fact that I can look at chess rules and know how to play chess in a week. Nobody would say that. I contest that you will be able to play chess, but you won't be able to play it really well. That takes time. And I think what I took from this post from this guy on Facebook was, again, the misconception that since this is a game, and we don't know which game he was referring to, since it's a game, it's a board game, it has to be simple. I have to be able to take a rule book, watch maybe a how it is played video, sit down and just, you know, have a blast. And I think that this is due to the fact that a lot of people still don't know that modern board games, and I'm not talking about games like Monopoly, which is really light on rules, and although there are very few rules, people get them wrong still, and I'm one of those people, or even games like Clue, where the rule set is really, really light. In order to play them well, the modern board games, you have to really invest time. There are games that are very, very tactical. There are games that are very, very strategic. I'm looking at UK's Blue. And you cannot expect just sitting there and looking at the board, taking the rules, going out there and finding a winning succession and sequence of moves. I don't think this is possible. And when we look at the complexity of rules, I would say that when you look at chess rules, the rules you could explain, I would say, on 4 A4 pages if you use diagrams. It's all it takes. If you look at the SGBOH rules or even GBOH rules, we're talking about the simplified Great Battles of History and the Great Battles of History rule sets, they are much more complex than the rules of chess. They take up a lot more space, there is a lot more variability, there are a lot more moving pieces, as it were, than there are in chess, and many, many more things you have to take into consideration, which is why the rule set is actually quite heavy. And I think that even when you look at this, you should get the feeling for the fact that modern board games are actually quite complex. They're not necessarily complicated, but they are complex. And to make a case in point, I recently bought Pax Porfiriana and Pax Pamir. And I'm really struggling with those games. I've played and aborted, I think, 3 sessions of Pax Pamir. I'm trying to get to grips with the rule set, and I'm looking at the rules, at the living rules at the moment. And they're like 13 pages long, not that much. And I would say that they are probably really badly written, would be my excuse, although I can't even say that they are. I've also looked at the solo rules, which make the game really strange and very dynamic. And in all fairness, Pax Pamir was never meant to be a solo game. They tagged on the solo rules, which is really great, but I just don't think it lends itself to being played solo. But even when I look at it as a multiplayer game, Pax Pamir is way more complicated. And I'm not saying complex because it's not complex, it's complicated. There's a difference than Mage Knight. Mage Knight is complex, but it's not complicated. It takes some time to understand how to use cards, and it also takes your ability to new heights to just sit out a turn when you sit there with great cards, which you can't use. And it happened to me only today when I played a session that I had great cards for attacking someone, but I was in the middle of a tile, I couldn't move, and I couldn't attack anyone either. So I could have, in theory, played all of my attack cards sideways and just generated 5 movement points, which really didn't help me either, because it was I was almost in the middle of a forest and it was night, so that would have moved me 1 square. So what did I do? Because I also didn't want to use all of these cards, which are really brilliant for attacking because they're fighting cards, I discarded 1, drew up 1 more, and played another turn. So basically the dummy player went, but I wasted a card. But, you know, it did help. But it is to do with understanding the situation on the board, understanding the situation in your tableau, where you have your units, if you have any, where you have your skills, if you've already got them, and your available mana crystals, mana tokens that you may have earned, and mana dice. Look at your cards and then come up with the next best step. And this is one thing that I find really fascinating about Mage Knight. There isn't one winning strategy. There isn't one best move. And if you just stick to this one move, you will definitely either score a really high fame value, or you will win if you're playing against other people. Because the game is, although the card pool is quite finite, I have more cards for Lord of the Rings LCG than I have in Mage Knight. The combinations are just mind-boggling, and I haven't even looked at the golden units. I've only ever played with the silver ones because I'm still in the first scenario, because I want to play every Mage Knight and see how they feel differently. And they do feel very different when you play them. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that if somebody feels that modern board games are not for them, I would say, number 1, don't approach them thinking that you're encountering a Clue, a Ludo, a Snakes and Ladders game. This is not what most modern board games, especially some board games that have tactical or strategic undertones. And I would say Mage Knight is a tactical game. A lot of course, war games are strategic games. There are also tactical games. But even a game like Arkham Horror or Eldritch Horror has a lot of complexity simply because of all the moving parts in it. I would say that Eldritch is the more streamlined of the two. But it also, has a level of complexity, which is mainly to do with you have to read the rules and you have to check what happens when X, Y, Z happens, and you have a lot of information to take in. And if you feel that modern board games are not for you, I would say that's a very difficult and blanket statement to make, because there isn't one single modern board game. There are so many different types of modern board games out there. And if it's really Mage Knight that puts you off, I would say maybe go for a game that's less tactical to begin with. Because, and this is where I'm now going to talk about Mage Knight, because I said in the beginning that I really didn't feel Mage Knight appealed to me when I first encountered it. I hadn't played it, I'd just seen it played. And there were two fantastic playthroughs that I watched. Solo McLaughlin does a fantastic playthrough, and Rick Royale also does fantastic playthroughs. But I was looking at them, and I watched the whole series each time, and I was like, okay, meh, I don't know. This is Mage Knight. This is what everybody's so hyped about. I don't get this. And that was about 5 years ago, I would say. Maybe 4. Yeah. So 4, maybe 3. I don't know when Chrissy McLaughlin did her playthrough, but it was several years ago anyways. However, since then, I played a lot of war games initially, so that's where I came from. I did have some hobby games, like I did have Arkham Horror, which I still have, but I haven't played in years. I have The Lord of the Rings by Rainer Knizia, which I think is a fantastic game. But it's a Euro with a theme pasted onto it, as some people will say. But I say it's a theme that has excellent mechanics. This is why the two work. I have War of the Ring, not a fan, but simply because it's very difficult to play this one solo. But I just wanted to have it in my collection. But of course, then I discovered games like the Lord of the Rings card game, LCG, which I hadn't really played before. I had no idea of deck construction games, deck building games. They'd completely passed me by. I had heard of Magic the Gathering, and it didn't really have that big an impact on me, probably because of the clientele that played it when I was younger. And I was like, no, there's just no room for me there. But what I would say is, when I recently looked at Mage Knight again, and this was prompted by this discussion on the forum in Facebook only 4 weeks ago, I rewatched Solo McLaughlin's walkthrough, and I rewatched Rick Royale's walkthrough, and I was like, this game is amazing. This game is totally amazing. And I bought it. I went on to Amazon and I bought the main game and 2 expansions for 116 euros, including shipping. That's around 160, maybe 50, $160, maybe 90 pounds sterling. And I'm having a blast. And I know when I said, okay, I've bought this, everybody's like, okay, so now you're going to spend the next 2 weeks reading the rules and trying to understand them. And I have to say, no. I was actually quite surprised. I was a bit daunted, kind of like, okay, now I've got these 2 rule books. And I looked at the walkthrough one, and it says, don't read the rules, start here. And if you go through that walkthrough, it actually explains to you how to play the game in a really, really good way. I really don't know why people are so unhappy about the rule book. I remember the rule book, first edition, Arkham Horror German edition. That was a total nightmare. That was like totally confusing. You didn't find anything. There was no glossary. Things were information was posted in really strange places where you didn't really expect it to be, because you would say logically it belongs somewhere else. So compared to this, I have to say that, or compared to many war games that I've played, and also Pax Pamir and Pax Porfiriana, the rule book for Mage Knight is totally convincing. They really thought this through. Now, mind you, the edition I have, and I don't know if there are different editions or if they made changes through print runs, is very recent. I mean, it came out in 2011 or 2012. I bought mine in 2018. I doubt that I got a first print run version. So maybe they've made changes to that as well, because I also didn't experience the issues that people had with the original rules for Robinson Crusoe, because I bought mine last year, the new edition with the new picture on it, and I had no problems whatsoever. The rules are just fine. But maybe it's also because I've read so many rule books that I'm like, well, yeah, that's fine. I just get what they're saying. So Mage Knight, I would say, now appeals to me because it is so many different things. And I'll tell you what they are, but first I will start off with what it's not. It's not an immersive fantasy game. It's not rune-bound, although it has aspects of rune-bound. It's not Middle-earth Quest, although it has some slight resemblances to it. Mage Knight has many parents. It's not an orphan. It has the exploratory tile discovery mechanic that you find in the D&D board games. It has the idea of having a solo character, which, for example, reminds me of Runebound, because I always play Runebound with only one character. You can get additional characters, if you like, by having units under your command, but you have to earn basically fame to be able to do this. You start out with only one unit slot. You can buy cards like you can in a deck builder. So, for example, if you have influence, it's called in this game, and if you are in a place where you can recruit cards, and in this case, it's only units, and maybe some advanced action cards if you're in a monastery, you can spend that influence by playing those cards to gain the other cards. So that's a lot like your normal deck builder, although a deck builder it is not, because a main difference is you have 16 starting cards, 2 of which are your personalized cards. The rest are the same cards for everybody, although not everyone has the same slots available. So in some cases, the mana cards were replaced, and in other cases, it may have been an attack card or whatever. So that each knight does play differently and does feel different. But at least in the games that I've played so far, I've maybe bought 3 advanced actions. I gained a couple of spells the last time around when I was playing with Tovak. That was simply because the mage towers were close and I was able to get to them and defeat them. This time around, I didn't even manage to get close to any mage towers. So last time I actually ended up with a couple of spells too. But depending on how long you play, I would say, and depending on what you do and what kind of adventures you engage in, you may end up with no spells. And you can still play really well. So spells are not a prerequisite. So this time round, I had 3 units and 3 advanced action cards in my deck at the end of the game, after 2 days and 2 nights. At the end of a game of, let's say, Legendary Encounters Alien, I would still have my 12 starting cards, unless I killed 1 or 2 of them. You can kill cards in this game as well. You can throw them away. There is a possibility. But that only happens later when you get certain advanced action cards that require you to do this. But then you have to do it every single time you play this card, so you want to be careful about those. But at the end of a normal Alien deck builder game, I would say I've probably got 40 to 50 cards. Yeah, 30 to 40 in my total. Maybe that's, 30 cards, 40 cards, including the base cards. Yeah, so I may have bought 28 cards, or is that too many? But you know, I would have got a sizable stack, but it's way more new cards than I would have started out, and way more cards than I get here. I've never managed to get as many cards as I've got in my starting hand here in Mage Knight. But that doesn't mean that this is normal. It's just that's how it's played out. It's not a deck construction deck either. You don't have a card pool from which you can build your deck, although there are variants which allow for card drafting, for example, where you get 6 cards to draw from the advanced action deck, and you choose 3, and each round, not each turn, but each round, you gain 1 of these in addition. So that's a nice way of actually planning ahead and, you know, making a decision as to how you would like your night to play out. I really like this. I haven't tried it out, but it's a really nice variant, which is in the rulebook, by the way. And it is not a tactical game in terms of combat, because combat is completely abstracted. You have your target values that you have to meet. You have your block. You have your, well, you could in theory use siege attack or remote attack. What is that called? Ranged attack, if you have enough. I've only ever used ranged attack twice or so successfully. Then you have your block phase, where basically you are assaulted and you can either take the damage and soak it up, in which case you take wounds, or you can put up a blockade, as it were, and if you have enough, then you can block it. You can't partly block, which is a bit of a problem, I find, and they've changed this apparently in Star Trek Frontiers, which is Mage Knight Light, as some people call it. I'm not going to comment on this because I haven't played it, but apparently it's a lot more streamlined and a lot less, I don't know, complex, but this is one of the main differences. You can part block. You can't in this game. And then you make your own attack and you can launch your own forces against it and hopefully then win. So very, very abstract. No tactical involvement in the actual battle. And tactics are involved when you move around the board, when you make a decision where to go next, when you make a decision if you want to confront an enemy or not, if you want to assault a tower or a keep or not. And so it is a mixture of different playing mechanics that you have there. And of course, they have made it possible for themselves, although I don't know if they're ever going to expand the game, which I would love. I mean, if they got out a new card deck or something, I would buy it. Not an additional Mage Knight, because I've already got 5 or 6. I've got 6, that's enough. But if they brought out more advanced action cards, for example, or if they said, okay, we're going to give you a set of stronger advanced action cards and also stronger enemies, so that you can basically play through a campaign and level up your knight, which at the moment you can't. And not really. I mean, you do get stronger, but the monsters kind of stay the same. So it's not like you say in Descent, for example, 2nd edition, where you have like the first level monsters, and once everybody has got enough experience points, you get into the 2nd level scenarios where where all the monsters are stronger. So that's not how this plays out at the moment, at least. Maybe there is a variant out there somehow that I haven't seen, but that's possible. But I think by constructing the map tiles so that they have different icons on them that signify different things, you could easily expand on this and come up with all kinds of scenarios that people could play. And this is probably something where a lot of people may be unhappy with the game, and that is that it's in a fantasy setting. It's in a universe called Atlantia, or on a planet called Atlantia, and apparently there was a Mage Knight miniatures game that's set in the same universe, and that was discontinued years ago. And they've basically stolen the scenario, as it were. They stole from themselves, because it was also WizKids that had this miniatures game. But it doesn't make any difference. You could be in Eberron or Forgotten Realms or I don't know, anywhere. It's kind of medieval. There is magic. It's a high fantasy setting. You know, it's the setting doesn't matter, and it's not immersive. There are no event cards, and I'm not missing this. I'm not criticizing this. I'm actually totally fine with it. There is some backstory which I've kind of just perused, and I'm like, yeah, I don't care. Just give me my knight, give me my deck, and let me go off. I don't care what his background is and what her background is. I just want to have fun. I just want to go out and slay some monsters and go to some dungeons, which, again, dungeon crawls don't do dungeon crawls. It's completely, again, flipping a token and then seeing what hits you. But it's just an amazing game. So I started out with saying there's a difference between how to play and why to play, and I'm sticking to that argument. And I'm ending with, if you're interested in complex board games that are not necessarily immersive, and you would like to have kind of like a high fantasy touched Euro game, because I think that's what Mage Knight actually is, you should go and check it out. And I can recommend playthroughs by Sola McLaughlin on YouTube. That's her YouTube nickname. Rick Royal, who's done, I think, 3 or 4. And also Kalasmar, the Lonesome Gamer. He has done The Lost Legion, he's done the base game, and he's done, I want to say, Krang. And if you watch some of these, and you should really watch the whole playthrough, you shouldn't just watch one episode, you should watch it to the end. Sola McLaughlin will give you a very insightful view into the player's head. What goes on in someone's mind when they're playing? What decisions are they faced with? And what decisions does she take? That doesn't mean that you would have to take the same decisions. And she doesn't say that anywhere in her videos. But it does show you a lot about what you have to think about if you are an experienced player. And when she made that video, she had, of course, played it several times, so she knew what she was doing. But for a new starter, I think this is very, very, very insightful. Rick Royal just does a brilliant Box of Delight playthrough. There is nothing I can say about this except go and watch it. And Kalasmar does his own playthrough. And I don't know, I think Kalasmar doesn't really do the Lonesome Gamer doesn't do a rules explanation, but Rick has a rules explanation video as well. So that's all from my end. It seems like the snow is turning into rain a little bit, which is not so good because the sun is going to set in a couple of hours and it's all going to freeze over. But I wish you all a pleasant evening wherever you are, and have a nice day. Bye bye.